It all started on Halloween night, just after sunset. The air was crisp, pumpkins flickered on porches, and kids in costumes raced around, collecting candy. I was home, chilling on my couch after a long day, scrolling through my phone when the notification popped up. I didn't think much of it at first, just some random new app. But then, my phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Emily, one of my best friends. "Dude, did you get that weird app too?" It just showed up. "It's creepy." I opened the app. It had no name, just a black screen with a single, flashing sentence: "Complete the dare or face the consequence." I laughed it off. This had to be some weird Halloween prank, right? A dare game? I was about to ignore it, but then the message changed. "Kyle Davidson, it's your turn." My name was on it. I felt my stomach drop. How did it know my name? A second later, my phone pinged again. This time, it wasn't just from the app. My group chat with a bunch of friends was blowing up. Messages from Jake, Emily, and Kevin flooded in. They were all talking about the same thing. The app had appeared on their phones too, and it knew their names. Jake, always the brave one, decided to go first. His dare was simple: go to the park and take a picture of the oldest tree. He laughed and shrugged it off, already putting his shoes on. But Emily wasn't laughing. She messaged, "I don't like this. Something feels wrong." Jake went silent for a bit. Then, about 20 minutes later, he texted back, "Done. Easy. You guys worry too much." But something in me wasn't settled. I had that tight feeling in my chest, the one you get when something is about to go very, very wrong. Then, my phone buzzed again. "Kyle, your dare: visit the cemetery and stand by the oldest grave until midnight." I froze. I live near the cemetery, just a few blocks away. The app was tracking me. But the creepy part? It was only 10 p.m. It wanted me to stand there for 2 hours. I messaged the group. "Guys, this is messed up. We should delete the app." But Jake texted back, "Come on, Kyle, it's Halloween. Just a prank. Let's see where it goes. Worst case, you get some chills, right?" I wasn't so sure, but Jake was always the pushy one. The thing that really got to me, though. Emily, usually cautious, was staying quiet. No objections. Just silence. With a knot in my gut, I grabbed my jacket, slipped on my shoes, and headed out. The night air was colder than I expected, biting at my skin as I walked toward the cemetery. The streets were eerily quiet, even for Halloween. Normally, you'd still hear kids laughing or teenagers pulling pranks, but tonight? Nothing. Just the sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty neighborhood. I kept checking my phone, hoping someone from the group chat would text me and say this was all just a bad joke. But nothing came. Just the dark screen of the app, and the countdown timer beneath the dare: 1 hour, 45 minutes left. When I reached the cemetery gates, my heart started to pound harder. The cemetery wasn't massive, but it had been here for ages, and some of the gravestones were so old you could barely read them. The gates creaked as I pushed them open, and the gravel crunched under my feet as I stepped inside. My phone buzzed again. "Kyle, you're getting close." Close to what? I kept walking, my breath visible in the cold night air, the shadows of gravestones stretching out in front of me. I could barely see anything, just faint outlines in the darkness. I checked my phone's flashlight but hesitated to turn it on. For some reason, I didn't want to draw attention to myself. The app buzzed again, lighting up my screen: "Find the grave of Eleanor Finch. Oldest in the cemetery." I vaguely remembered that name. I had heard about Eleanor Finch before, probably in some local legend. Supposedly, she was one of the first people buried here, way back in the 1800s. Some said her ghost still haunted the cemetery, but I'd never put much stock in those stories. Until now. I searched for what felt like forever, walking between the gravestones, squinting at the worn-down letters. After what seemed like an eternity, I found it, a tall, moss-covered stone at the far end of the cemetery, tucked under a twisted old tree. The name Eleanor Finch was barely legible, but it was there. This was it. I checked the time, 11:30 p.m. I had half an hour to go. I just had to stand there until midnight. Easy enough, right? But then, the whispers started. At first, I thought it was just the wind through the trees, but as I stood there, I could hear voices. Faint, unintelligible murmurs. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned around, searching the darkness. No one was there. Just rows of gravestones, shadows dancing in the moonlight. I grabbed my phone and texted the group, "Guys, I'm at the grave. Hearing some creepy shit. You sure this isn't a setup?" No reply. Then, a new message from the app popped up, "Stand still, Kyle. Don't move. Whatever happens, do not leave the grave." My blood ran cold. How did it know I was thinking about bolting? I stared at the screen, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I looked around again, but nothing. Just me, the trees, and Eleanor Finch's grave. Do not move. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a shape, barely visible at the far end of the cemetery. But as I squinted, it started to take form. A figure. A woman in a long, dark dress, slowly walking between the graves, her head tilted slightly to the side, her movements slow and deliberate. I froze. She was moving toward me, gliding almost, her pale face barely visible in the dim light. I wanted to run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave, to sprint out of there and never look back. But I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot. My phone buzzed again, "Stay. Do not move, Kyle." The woman was closer now, her face clearer. Her eyes were wide, empty, as if she could see right through me. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my voice was stuck in my throat. She stopped, just a few feet away from Eleanor Finch's grave. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just those eyes, those lifeless, hollow eyes, staring right at me. And then, she whispered. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel the cold, suffocating weight of them pressing down on me. My heart was racing. My legs trembled, but I didn't move. I couldn't. The app had warned me. As the clock on my phone ticked closer to midnight, the whispers grew louder, circling around me, coming from every direction. My mind screamed at me to run, but my feet stayed planted. And then, just as the clock hit 12 a.m., she vanished. Gone. As if she was never there. My phone buzzed one last time, "Congratulations, Kyle. Dare completed." But the app wasn't done with me yet. A new message appeared immediately after, "Next player, Emily Parker. Her turn is coming." I bolted out of the cemetery, but I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. The app wasn't going away. And I had no idea how dangerous the next dare would be. By the time I got home, my mind was racing. I locked the door behind me, slid down onto the floor, and tried to steady my breathing. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely text. I pulled out my phone and fired off a message to the group chat, "Guys, this is messed up. I just got through my dare, and the app says Emily's next." No response. I tried again. Emily. You there? Did you get the dare? Still nothing. I felt a cold dread creep over me. Emily was the cautious one, the sensible one. If something was wrong, she'd have said something by now. My thumb hovered over her contact. I was about to call her when my phone buzzed again. It was from the app. Emily Parker, your dare, jump off the old bridge. You have 1 hour. My heart nearly stopped. The old bridge was abandoned, dangerous. People had gotten hurt just exploring it, let alone jumping off it into the water below. It was late October, and the river was freezing. There was no way she could survive that. I called her immediately. The phone rang, once, twice, then went to voicemail. Emily. Don't do it. I saw your dare. It's not worth it. Call me back. I hung up and sent a quick text to Jake and Kevin. Has anyone heard from Emily? She got a dangerous dare. We need to stop her. Jake finally responded, dude, relax. It's probably just another stupid prank. Emily's not crazy. She won't do something like that. I wasn't so sure. Kevin chimed in, you guys are overthinking this. Just a Halloween joke. I bet she's laughing at us right now. Something about that rubbed me the wrong way. The app, the dares, they were getting darker, more dangerous. This wasn't just some game. I had felt it in that cemetery. Something real was happening, something we didn't understand. I grabbed my jacket and bolted out the door. I couldn't sit around and hope that Emily would make the right decision. If she was heading to that bridge, I had to stop her. The bridge was about a 15-minute drive from my place, but it felt like an eternity. My mind kept racing with thoughts of Emily standing on the edge, alone, and that damn app pushing her to jump. When I arrived, the moonlight cast long shadows over the rusted beams of the bridge. The wind whistled through the cracks in the metal, and the water below looked like a black abyss, cold and unforgiving. There were no streetlights here, no signs of life. Just me and the empty night. I called her again, my phone shaking in my hand. Voicemail. I cursed under my breath and ran toward the bridge. And then, I saw her. Emily was standing near the edge, staring down into the dark water. She looked frozen, like she wasn't really there, just staring. My heart pounded in my chest. I ran toward her, shouting her name. Emily. Don't do it. Get away from the edge. She didn't turn around, didn't even flinch. It was like she couldn't hear me. I finally reached her and grabbed her arm, pulling her back from the ledge. She blinked, like she had just woken up from a trance, and stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. Kyle, she whispered, her voice shaky. I don't know what I'm doing here. I didn't want to come, but the app. It won't stop. It kept telling me I had to. It's like I wasn't in control. My blood ran cold. The app wasn't just giving dares anymore. It was compelling people to act, pulling them into its sick game. We need to leave, I said, gripping her arm tighter. Now. But as I pulled her away from the edge, her phone buzzed. She looked down at it, and I could see the fear in her eyes. Emily Parker, you failed to complete the dare. Consequence, death. She screamed and dropped the phone like it had burned her. The wind picked up, howling through the beams of the bridge, and I could feel the temperature drop suddenly. Something was wrong, something very, very wrong. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow. Dark and twisted, it slithered along the beams of the bridge, moving unnaturally fast. I blinked, and it was gone. But I could feel it, the weight of something watching us, something waiting. Kyle, Emily's voice trembled. It's here. We ran. I dragged her off the bridge as fast as we could go, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the empty night. But no matter how fast we ran, that feeling of being watched never left. It was like the shadows themselves were closing in, tightening around us. When we finally reached the car, we jumped in, slamming the doors behind us. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, and floored it out of there. For a long while, neither of us spoke. We just sat in the car, breathing heavily, staring straight ahead. Emily was clutching her phone like it might explode in her hand. "Do you think," she whispered, "do you think it's really over?" Before I could answer, her phone buzzed again. I watched as her face went pale, her eyes wide with terror. She didn't even need to say it. I knew exactly what it was. The app wasn't done with us. And whatever it wasn't going to stop. Emily's phone lit up in the dark car, casting an eerie glow on her terrified face. She didn't want to look at it, but I could see her hands shaking as she held the phone in her lap, the screen pulsing like it was alive. I grabbed it from her before she could check the message. I had to see it for myself. New player, Jake Harrison. His dare will begin in 1 hour. My stomach churned. It was spreading. Whatever this app was, whatever force was behind it, was moving from person to person, like a virus. First me, then Emily, and now Jake. I called Jake immediately, my heart pounding. The phone rang once, then again, and finally, he picked up. "Kyle, what's up? Did Emily do her dare?" He sounded casual, like we hadn't just escaped death on that bridge. "You need to listen to me," I said, my voice low and urgent. "The app is targeting you next. You need to turn your phone off right now. Don't read anything, don't answer any messages. Just turn it off." And Jake laughed, cutting me off. "Bro, calm down. I told you, it's just some stupid prank. You and Emily are overreacting." "No, Jake." I yelled into the phone. "This isn't a prank. The app knew we were at the bridge. It's not just dares. People die if they fail." "Yeah, sure," he scoffed. "Look, if I get some dumb dare, I'll just ignore it. What's the worst that can happen? My phone explodes." Pfft. I heard him chuckling, like none of this was serious, and then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my knuckles white. He had hung up. Jake, being the reckless idiot he was, didn't believe a word I said. "Is he going to listen?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," I muttered, still gripping my phone like it was the only thing holding my sanity together. "He thinks it's all a joke." I glanced at my phone again, debating whether to text him, send a message, anything. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. He wouldn't listen until it was too late. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes flicking nervously to the road. What if we could stop it? What if we deleted the app? My heart leaped at the suggestion, but I quickly remembered the weird, unsettling behavior of the app. "I don't think it's that simple, Em. This thing, it's like it's alive. It's not just some random download. It's doing something to us." But I had to try. I grabbed my phone, found the app icon on my screen, and held it down to delete it. The option appeared, "Delete app," and I pressed it without hesitation. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope. But then, the screen glitched. The app didn't disappear. It stayed there, like it was embedded in my phone. Worse, The screen began to flicker violently, the app pulsing as if it was angry. And then, my phone buzzed. A new message from the app appeared, chilling me to the core. You cannot delete me, Kyle. Play the game or suffer the consequences. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. The air in the car seemed to thicken, the weight of something dark pressing down on me. I looked at Emily, her face as pale as mine. I tried once more to delete it. Same result. No matter what I did, the app stayed, like a parasite feeding on my phone. My last-ditch effort was to turn off the phone, but even then, as I held the power button down, the screen refused to go dark. We need help, Emily said, her voice shaking. Maybe there's someone who can figure this out. A hacker? A tech expert? There's gotta be someone who knows how to break something like this, right? I nodded, though deep down, I wasn't sure if anyone could help. This wasn't just some virus or glitch. It was something else, something beyond explanation. We can try, I said, my voice hoarse. But first, we need to get to Jake. If he doesn't take this seriously, I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. We both knew what could happen to him if he ignored the dare. We drove to Jake's place as fast as we could, the dark streets whizzing by, our minds racing with worst-case scenarios. I tried calling him again on the way, but it went straight to voicemail this time. Typical Jake, probably turned off his phone, thinking he could avoid it. When we finally pulled up outside his apartment, the building was dark, save for the dim glow of his window on the second floor. I bolted out of the car, with Emily close behind, and pounded on his door. Jake! Open up. It's Kyle. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then, I heard footsteps on the other side. The door creaked open, and Jake stood there, looking amused. Dude, what's your deal? He asked, leaning casually against the doorframe. I told you, it's just, his phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. I saw the momentary flash of concern in his eyes before he reached for it. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and laughed. See? Just a dare, he said, turning the phone toward me. I froze when I read it. Jake Harrison, your dare, stay in the house alone until 3 a.m. Do not let anyone inside, no matter what. You have 1 hour. I looked at Jake, my blood running cold. He was grinning, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. See? Easy. I'll just chill and, the lights in his apartment suddenly flickered. A long, drawn-out creaking sound echoed from inside, as though something heavy was moving upstairs. Jake's face paled. What the hell was that? He muttered, stepping back. I told you, Jake. This isn't a joke. My voice was a whisper now. Something's here. As if on cue, the creaking sound came again, this time louder, closer. Emily stepped back, her eyes wide with fear. Jake's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and froze. The game has begun. Jake stared at his phone, the grin wiped clean from his face. His cocky attitude drained away, replaced by something I hadn't seen in him before, fear. The air felt heavier now, and the temperature in his apartment seemed to drop. I could hear Emily breathing rapidly behind me, her panic barely contained. We need to get out of here, I said, my voice trembling. This thing is real, Jake. You can't just ignore it. He didn't respond. Instead, he backed away from the door, staring into the dimly lit hallway behind him. The creaking sound from upstairs came again, longer this time, like someone, or something, was dragging something heavy across the floor. Thud, creak, thud, creak. Jake swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "It's just, the pipes," he muttered, more to himself than to us. "It's an old building." But none of us believed that. Emily tugged on my sleeve, her eyes pleading. "We can't just leave him here." I knew she was right. But at the same time, the app's warning was clear. Jake had to stay inside, alone, until 3 a.m. We couldn't stay, but leaving him didn't sit right with me either. "Jake, listen to me," I said, stepping forward. "You have to stay in here alone. We can't be with you, but you need to take this seriously. Do not let anyone, or anything, inside." He nodded slowly, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. The cocky facade was gone, but so was the fight in him. He was scared, and when Jake got scared, he made stupid decisions. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from upstairs. It wasn't the slow, drawn-out creaking this time, this was something much louder, like a door slamming shut with force. Jake flinched, and Emily let out a small gasp. "What was that?" Emily whispered, clutching my arm tightly. Jake turned toward the stairs leading up to his room. His phone buzzed again in his hand, and we both glanced at the screen. "Go upstairs, Jake." His face went pale. He dropped the phone, letting it clatter onto the hardwood floor. We all stared at it, the message glowing ominously in the dim light. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then Jake shook his head, his eyes wide. "No. No, I'm not doing that. I'm staying right here. I'm not going up there." I couldn't blame him. The sense of dread was thick in the air, almost suffocating. Whatever was upstairs, it wasn't something Jake, or any of us, should face. But the app wasn't done with him yet. Another message flashed on the screen: "If you don't go upstairs, I will come to you." We all froze. The room suddenly felt impossibly cold, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I could feel it now, a presence. Something else was here, watching us, waiting. Jake bent down and grabbed the phone, his hands trembling. His eyes flicked up to the stairs, then back to us. "Kyle," he whispered. "What do I do?" I didn't have an answer. Everything in me screamed to get the hell out of that apartment, but leaving him to face whatever this was alone. I couldn't do it. Emily spoke up, her voice shaking. "You need to go upstairs, Jake. Just, get it over with. It's the only way." Jake's eyes darted from me to Emily, and then to the dark stairwell. He hesitated for a long moment, his breathing rapid and shallow. Then, with a shaky exhale, he nodded. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll go." He took a step toward the stairs, his foot creaking on the old wood. Then another step. Each movement felt heavy, deliberate, like he was walking into his own grave. I could feel Emily's hand gripping my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. We watched as Jake slowly ascended the stairs, his figure disappearing into the shadows. The creaking grew louder with each step, echoing through the silent apartment. When he reached the top, he paused, standing at the threshold of his bedroom. For a long moment, there was nothing. Just silence. Then, a whisper. Faint, but unmistakable. Coming from the room. I barely caught it, but it chilled me to the bone. Jake froze in place, his entire body going rigid. He slowly turned his head, staring into the darkness of his room. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice cracking. There was no answer. Just the stillness of the night. Then, the whisper came again. Louder this time. "Jake, come closer." His legs moved on their own, almost like he was in a trance. He stepped into the room, disappearing from our view entirely. Emily let out a small, terrified whimper next to me. "Jake, get out of there!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. "Come back down." "Don't." Before I could finish, the door at the top of the stairs slammed shut with a deafening bang. Emily screamed, and I rushed up the stairs, banging on the door. "Jake! Open up!" No response. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear something, anything. But all I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears. Suddenly, Jake's phone buzzed again in my hand. I glanced down, dreading what I was about to see. Jake Harrison has failed to complete the dare. Consequence, death. My blood turned to ice. Emily gasped, clutching my arm even tighter. "No. No, that can't be right," I whispered, banging on the door harder. "Jake! Answer me!" There was no reply. Just silence. I turned to Emily, my face pale. "We need to get out of here. Now." But before we could move, the door creaked open, just a crack. A voice came from the darkness inside. Not Jake's voice. "Kyle, come in." The sound of that voice, Jake's voice, but twisted, wrong, chilled me to the core. I froze, my hand hovering over the door, my mind screaming at me to run, to get Emily and get the hell out of there. But something kept me rooted in place. Maybe it was the hope that Jake was still alive in there, or maybe it was the darkness calling to me, pulling me closer. "Kyle," the voice whispered again, more insistent this time. "Come in." Emily was trembling behind me, her hand gripping my jacket. "Kyle, don't. Please, we need to go. Something's wrong." She was right. Everything about this felt wrong. The cold air seeping through the crack in the door, the heavy silence pressing down on us, the voice that sounded like Jake but wasn't. But I couldn't leave him. Not without knowing for sure. "I have to see," I muttered, more to myself than to Emily. "I have to make sure." "Kyle, no." Emily tugged at my sleeve, her voice desperate. "Whatever's in there, it's not Jake. Please, let's just go." I turned to her, my heart pounding. "Go wait in the car. I'll be right behind you." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No. I'm not leaving you." Before I could argue, the door creaked open wider, revealing the pitch-black room beyond. My breath hitched in my throat. There was no light inside, just an endless, consuming darkness. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Stay close." Emily clung to me as we both stepped into the room. The air inside was colder than outside. I could see my breath puffing out in front of me, each exhale trembling with fear. The walls of the room felt too close, the shadows stretching and warping as if they were alive. I couldn't see Jake anywhere. Just emptiness. "Jake?" I called, my voice barely above a whisper. Nothing. The silence was thick, almost tangible, like the room itself was swallowing the sound. I stepped further in, my heart racing. Every instinct was screaming at me to turn around, to get out. But I couldn't stop. Something about this place had a hold on me. And then, I saw it. In the far corner of the room, barely visible in the darkness, was Jake. Or at least, it looked like Jake. He was standing with his back to us, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. His arms hung limply at his sides, and his entire body seemed to sway slightly, like he was a puppet on strings. "Jake?" I whispered, stepping closer. "What are you doing?" He didn't move. He didn't respond. Something was terribly wrong. "Kyle," Emily whispered, tugging at my arm again. "We need to go. Now." But I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor, my eyes locked on Jake's motionless form. And then, slowly, he began to turn. It wasn't a natural movement. His body shifted in jerky, mechanical motions, like something was pulling him, twisting him. When he finally faced us, my blood ran cold. It wasn't Jake. The thing standing in front of us had Jake's face, but it was distorted, wrong. His eyes were hollow, black pits, and his mouth was twisted into a grotesque grin. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his head hung at an unnatural angle, as if his neck had been snapped. But worst of all were his eyes. Those empty, soulless eyes that stared right through me. "Kyle," the thing whispered, its voice garbled, inhuman. "Stay with me," Emily screamed. I grabbed her arm and bolted for the door, my heart hammering in my chest. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't Jake, and we had to get out. Now. We raced down the stairs, the sound of footsteps echoing behind us, fast, too fast. That thing was coming after us. "Run!" I yelled, dragging Emily through the apartment and out the front door. We didn't stop until we were in the car, slamming the doors shut behind us. Emily was shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face, her breath coming in short gasps. I jammed the key into the ignition, my hands trembling, and floored the gas pedal. The tires screeched as we sped away from the apartment building, leaving that nightmare behind. For a few minutes, we didn't speak. The only sound was the roar of the engine and Emily's shaky breaths. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what we had just seen, what we had just escaped. Then, Emily broke the silence. "Kyle," she whispered, her voice trembling. What was that?" I didn't know. I didn't have any answers. Whatever that thing was, it had taken Jake, or worse, it had become Jake. But then, my phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what new horror the app had in store for us. But I couldn't ignore it. I pulled out my phone, my heart sinking as I read the message. "Next player, Kevin Thompson. His dare begins now." Emily let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. No. No, not Kevin too. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white. The app wasn't stopping. It was moving from one of us to the next, pulling us deeper into its twisted game. And I had no idea how to make it stop. Kevin was next. And I didn't know if we could save him. The drive to Kevin's place felt like a blur. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything that had happened. Jake was gone, no, worse, something had taken his place. That app wasn't playing a game anymore. It was collecting us, one by one, like trophies in some kind of twisted hunt. Emily sat beside me, her face pale, her hands trembling in her lap. She hadn't said a word since the app notified us that Kevin was next. I couldn't blame her. What could we say? We both knew that whatever we were dealing with wasn't human, wasn't natural. And Kevin had no idea what was coming for him. I pulled up outside his house, the engine idling as I stared at the darkened windows. His place was always a bit of a mess, overgrown yard, peeling paint, the works. But tonight, it felt even more run down, like the shadows had swallowed up any warmth or life that once lived there. I turned to Emily, her wide eyes locked on the house. "Are you ready for this?" I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. She shook her head, barely managing a whisper. "No," I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Stay behind me. If anything feels off, we get out, okay?" She nodded, her grip on my arm tightening as we stepped out of the car and approached Kevin's front door. I knocked once, twice. The door creaked open almost immediately. Kevin stood there, looking half asleep, rubbing his eyes like he'd just woken up. "Kyle. Emily. What the hell are you doing here this late?" His groggy, confused expression might have been almost funny if the situation wasn't so deadly serious. I pushed past him into the house, Emily close behind. "We don't have time to explain," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've got to listen to me, Kevin. The app, it's targeting you next. You need to stay away from it. Turn off your phone, do whatever you can to." Wait, Kevin cut me off, holding up his hand. "What the hell are you talking about? App? What app?" I froze, my stomach twisting. Could it be possible? Could Kevin have avoided the app somehow? Maybe we weren't too late. Maybe there was still time to stop it. But then, as if mocking my brief moment of hope, Kevin's phone buzzed loudly from the kitchen counter. His face dropped. He reached for the phone, and I grabbed his wrist, stopping him. "Don't," I said urgently. "Don't look at it, Kevin. What the hell is going on?" Kevin demanded, yanking his arm free and glaring at me. "Why are you freaking out over some stupid app? It's probably just spam or..." He grabbed the phone before I could stop him. His eyes scanned the screen, his face paling as he read the message. "Kevin Thompson, you're there, open the basement door. Do not close it until instructed. You have 30 minutes. Kevin's mouth fell open, confusion and fear battling for control over his expression. "What the hell is this? Did you guys set this up? Is this some kind of joke?" "It's not a joke, Kevin," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's real. The app. It's doing something to us. It's hunting us." Kevin stared at us, his face a mix of disbelief and terror. He laughed nervously, shaking his head. "No way. This is some Halloween prank, right? You guys are messing with me." I shook my head. "We're not messing with you, Kevin. Jake's gone. Something took him. And if you don't listen, if you don't take this seriously, you're next." Kevin's eyes flickered toward the basement door at the end of the hall. It was an old door, warped with time, the paint peeling off. The kind of door you'd avoid if you didn't have to go near it. It was always locked, sealed off because Kevin said it led to a part of the house he never used. But now, the app wanted him to open it. "Just don't do it, man," I said, stepping toward him. "You don't have to play the game. We can figure this out. We can find a way to stop it." But Kevin shook his head, backing away from us. "You don't get it," he muttered. "The app. It's giving me no choice. I've got 30 minutes. He hesitated, then turned to the basement door, his hand hovering over the knob. I lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "Kevin, no." But it was too late. He twisted the knob, and the door creaked open with a long, drawn-out groan. A rush of cold air spilled out from the darkness beyond. It smelled damp, musty, like the kind of place that hadn't seen light in years. The staircase leading down was steep, disappearing into the inky blackness below. For a long moment, none of us moved. Kevin stared into the dark, his face pale and drawn. Emily took a step back, shaking her head in disbelief. "This isn't happening," she whispered, almost to herself. "This can't be real." But it was real. Too real. Kevin glanced at his phone again, his fingers trembling as he held it up for us to see. Another message had appeared. Enter the basement. You have 10 minutes. Kevin swallowed hard, his hand gripping the edge of the door. He looked at me, his voice shaking. Kyle, what happens if I don't? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that ignoring the app had cost Jake his life. And I had no reason to believe Kevin would be any luckier. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and then, before I could stop him, he stepped into the darkness of the basement. The air seemed to thicken, the temperature dropping even lower as Kevin descended the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the silence. I stood frozen at the top, my heart pounding in my chest. Emily clung to my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Kyle, she whispered, we can't let him go down there alone. I nodded, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. Every part of me wanted to run, to get as far away from that basement as possible. But I couldn't leave him. I stepped forward, peering down into the darkness. Kevin was halfway down the stairs, his form barely visible in the dim light from the hallway. He turned back to look at us, his face pale and sweaty. You guys coming or what? I didn't answer. I just nodded, swallowing hard, and began to follow him down the stairs. The further we descended, the colder it became. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the smell of damp rot grew stronger with every step. The basement was pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallowed everything whole. I fumbled for my phone, using the flashlight to light the way. Kevin reached the bottom of the stairs first, stopping in his tracks. I could see his breath in the cold air, misting in front of him. What the hell is that? He whispered, pointing ahead. My flashlight beam swept across the floor, landing on something in the far corner of the basement. A door. Not just any door, a heavy, iron door, covered in rust and grime, like it had been sealed away for decades. Kevin's phone buzzed again, and he glanced down at it, his face going white as a sheet. Enter the door. Your time is running out.